Hello, Jeando.
Hi, Kevin. Good morning.
Today, let's talk about something Alexander mentions a lot in his writings, coordination. So, what is coordination? How do people normally use the term coordination? What does it mean to people normally? And how does Alexander use it in a different way? So, what is coordination and coordination of what?
Yeah, so there are two aspects to this, or maybe three aspects to this. What do people think is coordination? Very often they think it's a capacity that their organism has. So you have a certain quantity. They think they have a quantity of coordination. I'm not coordinated to play music, or I'm not coordinated to sit at a desk. I'm not coordinated to run fast. They think it's they have a certain amount of it. It's something that is more or less independent of their work. Of course, this is absolutely not how Alexander considered coordination. He's got a special way of writing coordination. He writes coordination with a dot between the co and the ordination. I'm not going to go deep into this for the moment. It just means that for him, coordination has a special meaning. It's not the everyday meaning. Now, Alexander talks about psychophysical coordination a lot. And that is the second aspect of it. That is completely contrary to what most people think, because it's not a capacity that you have at your birth with a very little margin of progress. No, for Alexander, psychophysical coordination is associated with his idea of general control of the movements, because he says we've seen last time that he's got this big center principle that for him the performance of any act involved the direction and performance of a connected series of preliminary movements. When you look at somebody bringing the hands forward toward the desk, for example, well, it looks like a very simple activity. If you look at it slowly enough with a motion capture system and you analyze, you will in fact see that moving the arms forward involves the whole balance, even if the person is sitting. And so there are anticipatory reactions, anticipatory movements of the different parts of the torso in order to compensate for the disequilibrium that is contained in the movement of the arms. And of course, for Alexander, it is possible to anticipate on the idea that anticipating is always faster than what we call a reflex or a learned habit. It's possible for him to, in fact, observe, analyze the different movements, and start ordering. So coordination, there is ordination in it, and it's got two different meaning that can be, in fact, compacted. One is to order, to give orders. Coordinating means giving orders, and giving, of course, a series of orders. And it's also ordinating. And ordinating is creating orders, creating order, creating some structure, creating a better way for a mechanism made of part in movement to perform an action. So for Alexander, you have any act involve the performance of a series of preliminary acts. So for example, for him, that means that the mechanism of the torso, if you want to, well, let's imagine you want to lengthen and widen the torso. For Alexander, lengthening and widening the torso involve the direction and performance of a connected series of preliminary movements. Most of the time, this direction and performance is subconscious, means that the person is not coordinating consciously the different movement. The person believes that it's simple. You just, for example, direct the movement of the arms, and you do as you feel for the rest of the movements. There is one part of the movement that is conscious. The movement of moving the hand forward is conscious. The person decided to do so. While doing so, the person has not anticipated that the movements of the mechanism of the torso have to happen, and they will. So there will be a coordination between one conscious movement and a series of 5, 4, 6 subconscious movements of the different parts of the torso. And it will be found that as a result of moving the hand forward, the person has shortened the back. Even if the person, as we will see later, has been instructed to lengthen and widen the back, and has repeated to herself to lengthen and widen the back. It will be seen that in some cases, we can say that the person is not perfectly coordinated. That means that the person receives correct orders. For example, it's a correct order to think to lengthen and widen the back. I consider it is a very appropriate order, but the order is not followed in practice by anything that would look like, for an observer, lengthening and widening the back. The person believes she's doing the right thing. The person believes she's in the right direction. But when you look at it, well, it's quite obvious that there is a problem of coordination between the instruction the person is giving and the movements that are seen recorded on the camera. So when you say coordination, when Alexander says psychophysical coordination, it's absolutely not the same meaning. For Alexander, psychophysical coordination is the capacity to, in fact, perform connected series of orders according to how they were previously thought and verbalized. So there is a connection between what you say and the action that are performed. When that connection is missing, Alexander considered that the person is not correctly coordinated. So everything in the initial Alexander technique is quite consistent. You have this idea that there is a direction and performance of a connected series of preliminary movements. So the person has to learn how to, in fact, project a connected series of orders. And this mental or intellectual capacity that is more mental than physical, of course, because it's happening only in the head of the person. When you project a connected series, nothing happens. It's just when you decide that that this series is going to be transformed into a decision to do all these things at once. This is only happening before the action actually occurs, and this mental activity is coordinated with a physical movement, with a physical gesture. So you have a real psychophysical coordination. So I wanted to talk about this because I've been attracted this weekend to a blog on the internet, and it's a blog by a modern Alexander technique teacher, and he explained different things. He's like us. He's doing a video a week apparently, and it's always the 3 best tips. So I was interested, and I just looked at one. It was the 3 best tips for more comfortable sitting. And one of the tips is, for example, that when people are seen to bring their hand forward to work with the keyboard, he notes that they tend to get attracted to the key, to the screen, and they tend, when they move the hand forward, they tend to, in fact, pull the upper torso down. Well, this can happen, obviously. And he says that the best tip is before reaching forward with the hand, the best tip is to think of lengthening and widening the back. And I thought it was interesting to talk about psychophysical coordination. This is because this is not psychophysical coordination. That what the gentleman is proposing is does not meet the requirement that FM Alexander has placed. So for us, it's very interesting to start with a real example. Why is it that thinking of lengthening and widening the back when bringing the hand forward is not psychophysical coordination? Well, let's see what Alexander has to say about this. And we are going back to constructive conscious control of the individual. And it's always the chapter that is projection of orders. So here, the orders that the pupil supposedly has to project is, of course, to think of lengthening and widening the back. So this is interesting in itself, because it supposes that thinking of lengthening and widening the back will create a lengthening and a widening of the back. I do believe that it is absolutely incorrect, that it is untrue. I've seen scores of teachers that have been thinking of lengthening and widening the back, and it's absolutely obvious on pictures, on films, that when they bring the hands forward, it's something that Alexander Technique teacher do. They bring their hands forward to work because they place their hands on people. But we all do it when we go to a keyboard, either for an instrument or for just writing or just doing anything on a table. We bring our hand forward, and it is seen that when we have an imperfectly coordinated person, that is, in the sense of Alexander, a person that cannot really translate instructions into action, well, it's obvious that we have a very complex instruction to lengthen and widen them back. It's complex on two levels. It's complex because it involves a series of preliminary acts that have to be, in fact, ordered together. But also it's complex because we know that it's the problem the person has. The teacher says that when the person brings the hands forward, it tends to shorten the back and to pull down. So we are asking a person that is pulling down, well, not to pull down. Just it's a very simple way of teaching. Stop stuttering or stop pulling down. Just lengthen when you bring your hands forward. There is no question of sending a series of preliminary acts, of ordering the movements. No. It's just stop doing it. That's it. Alexander talks about this, and I have a few images that I want you to see. One of them is this one. He says this whole book, the second book, is devoted to the exposure of the fallacy of asking an imperfectly coordinated person to attempt to eradicate a defect or peculiarity by some written or spoken instructions. It is certain that any person who fails to concentrate in the sense of giving due attention to the matter in hand is an imperfectly coordinated person. To ask such a person to overcome his failure to concentrate by concentrating, or by learning to concentrate in accordance with his conception of these acts, is to cause a harmful and artificial division of personality. What is needed is the restoration of a satisfactory condition of psychophysical coordination on a general basis, which will involve the use of the true processes of concentration. So when you ask a person to lengthen and widen the back before bringing the hands forward, when you know that it is exactly the defect that this person is producing, so you're pinpointing one defect, and you ask the person to make an effort of will or an effort of attention and think, well, don't do that. Don't do the wrong thing. Well, if the person was satisfactorily coordinated, that is, if the person was capable of translating instructions into action, which, of course, because this video I'm talking about is directed to the general public, it's absolutely obvious that the person has not tested to check whether the listener has any capacity in psychophysical coordination in order to translate the orders. It's like you are asking the person to give attention when the person is not capable of giving attention. Why is it that the person is not capable of giving attention? It's because you have to understand that we are already asking the person to manipulate different objects at the same time. That is, no matter what the teacher says the most comfortable, how to obtain the most comfortable sitting with your hands forward. What will happen is that this new organization, having the hand forward away from the back and the back away from the hands, will feel very strange to the person. So we are asking a person to, in fact, provoke a very strange feeling, and at the same time think at least of two things, which is two more things, which is the new geometry between the hands and the back. Well, the person has not been trained to use the mind in that way, to use connected ideas, and to start obtaining a wider field of attention. What the teacher says during the video is that the most difficult thing is to remember. So it's easy. So the most difficult thing is to remember, to, in fact, stop, think of lengthening and widening the back, not knowing anything about how this is going to be translated in practice, what it means. I don't think even that the teacher realizes that there are movements involved to lengthen and widen the back. But for Alexander, this is absolutely obvious. If there is a lengthening and widening of the back, there are movements involved. It's not just a tension or a certain tone in your body. No. It's easy to demonstrate when it is that the body is lengthening and widening. And when it is lengthening and widening, the different bony parts of the torso are really adjusted differently. So there are movements to adjust the body parts of the torso. So what is needed is a restoration. Well, I don't like the word restoration. It sounds like the person had once a satisfactory condition of psychophysical coordination on a general basis and lost it. Many people think that the child has a satisfactory condition of psychophysical coordination on a general basis, which is absolutely untrue. A child is absolutely incapable of using verbal instructions in order to organize even two movements of the different parts of the body. Oh yes, you will see the child moving around, but this moving around is just according to what the child feels. If you ask a 3-year-old to jump over a line with both feet, and you will find that under the stimulus of the line, if you show the movement, the 3-year-old child will be able to jump. But then you ask the child to jump on above an imaginary line, and you will find that his coordination does not match. is not yet capable of constructing the series of preliminary movements that are necessary to jump over a line that is not there. So a child cannot use verbal instructions in order, or I mean, complex series of connected verbal instruction in the sense that we use and we say projecting orders. Well, it's absolutely impossible for a child. Even well, all the tests I have made shows that before 9-year-old, 8 or 9-year-old, this complex psychophysical activity that we call projecting orders is impossible. It's so thinking that we had that satisfactory condition of psychophysical coordination sometime and lost it, and we need to restore it. I don't know where Alexander has found this idea. No, what is needed is the training. Yes, because that's the point with psychophysical coordination. It's not something that you own and that you need to use, that you must remember to use it. No. It's real. It's a real training. You need to develop the capacity to project orders. You need to develop the capacity to make sure and control that the orders you project, the connected orders you project, perform the correct activity. There must be a coordination between the orders you're giving and the result you're getting, because it's everybody knows that it's possible to send orders without obtaining any effect. It's possible to send orders without knowing which effects are required. So all this has to be trained. The first thing we do when we have lessons is we train what we see when we watch a video. Why? Well, it's because it's necessary to understand which movements correspond to which order, and whether the movements that are performed correspond to the instructions that are given. Otherwise, there is no way to control your activity. There is no way to control your psychophysical activity of projection. Not the activity in itself of sitting at a desk. No, the activity of projection. So Alexander says that this involves the true processes of concentration. He objects to the idea of concentration on one idea. Well, you should concentrate on stopping and lengthening, widening the back, thinking of lengthening and widening the back without, of course, having any idea of what it means. But can't you make an idea of it? Well, if it was a simple process, you could. But imagine it's a concerted series of movements that can make the back lengthen and widen. Then just thinking to lengthen and widen the back means nothing really. How could it, in fact, trigger a correct activity? It's impossible. And Alexander, you will see, is very clear about it. It's not something I have discovered. It's something that is written in the books. So the true processes of concentration that Alexander is talking about is not to concentrate on one idea. And so you have just to associate one idea, lengthening and winding the back with moving the hands forward. No, Alexander considers that lengthening and widening the back requires at least, 5 or 6 connected instructions, connected movements. Then you will get the back to lengthen and widen. So the true processes of concentration is the capacity to give due attention to the matter at hand. And the matter in hand in this case is a coordination of movements, of a series of movements. So it means that you need to become more and more capable at thinking at more than one thing at a time. You must be capable of having the capacity to think at, first of all, there is an object you must always have in mind, is that you're going to feel wrong when you perform these different movements, because these different movements that are lengthening and widening the back feel wrong, or feel nothing at all, which feels wrong too. So it's necessary to start to train in conditions where at the same time you're thinking at a series of geometrical objects, we call the adjustments between the movements of different parts, and at the same time have a part of your thinking that is to the fact that you're feeling wrong. And this coordination is not at all innate. Most people, when they start to feel wrong, it's absolutely clear, they start to concentrate on it. And it completely changes the tone of their activity, the way they think, the way they move. No, they feel wrong. Well, at first, it's my job to make my pupils feel wrong so that they get used to it. And they start to become capable of thinking very clear thoughts and repeating very clear instructions when feeling wrong. I think the first difficulty is at first to think and feel wrong at the same time. But it's absolutely necessary to cover this fact, because if you don't, your pupil is going to be left alone against the greatest difficulty of all, not concentrating on what feels something, or on the fact that I don't want to feel this, or I want to feel that. Concentration goes with the somatic system. When you enter into trying to feel, you will concentrate. It's absolutely simple. When you start with conscious guidance, it's different. You're asked to perform reasonings. You could say like calculation of movements. I always ask questions to my pupils about calculation of movements when they feel wrong. But it's just to help them to develop the capacity to expand their attention, so that it's not because they are feeling wrong that their mental capacity should decrease so much. And at first, it's exactly what happens. It's when we are feeling tired, when we are feeling wrong, when we produce a wrong series of movements, wrong series in the sense that it's absolutely not habitual, so feels wrong. We need to develop the capacity to detach your mind from it and open your mind. Open our mind to different objects that have relations. And these relations, when we talk geometry, for example, are interconnected. They are all dependent. So if you open an angle, you close another one. So how do you manipulate? I teach my pupils, all my pupils, to manipulate, but not manipulate with their hands. I teach them to manipulate their attention and to manipulate object within the attention. One object being feeling wrong, feeling strange, feeling out of sort. Is it possible to think when one feels out of sort? That is very different from the modern Alexander technique that proposes a more comfortable sitting at a desk. It's absolutely opposite. And so Alexander defined this opposition between two principles. There is the means whereby principle, and there is the end-gaining principle. The end-gaining principle has been so, in fact, tarnished by constant use by people of the modern Alexander who do not really read what Alexander has to say and how Alexander defines end-gaining. But the end-gaining conception is directly related with the absence of psychophysical coordination. So it's good here to come back to the text and see what it is Alexander has to say about such attempts. Here it comes. According to the first end-gaining conception, all that is necessary when an end is desired is to proceed to employ the different parts of the organism in the manner which your feeling dictates as necessary for the carrying out of the movement required for gaining the end. irrespective of any harmful effects due to misuse of the self during the process. The end-gaining conception implies the subordination of the thinking and reasoning self to the vagaries of the instinctive guidance and control of the self in carrying out the activity necessary to achieve the end. So let's take the example and try to see how the example corresponds to what Alexander is saying. So you're asking a person that has the habit of collapsing the torso and bringing the hands forward to stop and think of lengthening and widening the back before bringing the hands forward. So what the end that is desired, of course, here is to lengthen and widen the back. So you're asking the person to say the words, I want to lengthen and widen the back, or I wish to lengthen and widen the back. And so that's the end. And when the end is desired, it's absolutely obvious that the person is desiring the end, that there should be a distance between the hand and the back. All that is necessary is to employ the different parts of the organism in the manner in which the feeling dictates. That is, what is it for me to lengthen and widen the back? And how should I feel when I lengthen and widen the back? And that should do it. The movements that are required for gaining the end, for lengthening and widening the back, are going to be dictated by feeling. So the person that is using this procedure is using an end-gaining procedure. And the person is not going to check or feel herself or see whether the activity of lengthening and widening the back that should come with bringing the hands forward has had any effect or not. I think the person will somehow feel that she's doing the right thing. Well, she will feel that she's doing her best, at least. And her conscience will be satisfied. There is no reason to believe so. There is no reason to believe that thinking of a complex movement should happen will make the complex movement happen. This is magic. Well, in magic, you can think this in this way, but reasonably, there is nothing that can make us believe that having thought of back to lengthen and widen will make it happen. The second point on this is that also my experience as a touch teacher, as a stat teacher, because I was a stat teacher too a long time ago, is that the idea that promoting with the hands, the lengthening and the widening of the back, could serve as a target for the wish to lengthen and widen the back. Does not work either. It's like you are trying to obtain a very complex organization of movements, and when the person receives the touch, and the time it takes to reorganize the torso of a person, the person receiving the manipulation has no conception that there is a series of movements involved, and that these movements must be connected together, so that when one part of the torso is going one way, another part is going the other way, no way. The person has no clue as to what is happening. The person receives, in fact, a sensory experience. And so we are back to the problem that it's not possible to transmit sensory experiences with words, but it's not, in my view, at all possible to go from the sensory experience that you receive when you're moved to moving the different parts yourself to produce the same result. This is as impossible. So in both ways, asking a person to think lengthen and widen the back while moving the hands is just a specific instruction that has no way to produce any verifiable result. So in that, we have, in that, I mean, in both possibilities, either the person trying to think lengthen and widen back and hoping it's going to come, or the person that has received a manipulation and has a feeling of what it is to feel light and to think and to use these words, lengthen and widen the back, in order to elicit that complex organization of movements is impossible. It's an expression that Alexander used, the subordination of the thinking and reasoning self to the vagaries of instinctive guidance and control. That is, you believe, in fact, that the somatic intelligence is going to take over. Nobody has never seen somatic intelligence in action. It's always a person with a certain kind of ideas, a certain kind of ways of organizing the torso. And it's very interesting to watch these somatic teachers that are supposedly in contact with what is natural and what is real, and to see how they organize their torso when they move their hand forward, to see that, wow, they don't understand lengthening and widening the back in the same way as Alexander did. Of course, they don't, because they do not reason the lengthening and widening of the back. For them, it's an experience. It's an experience they have received from the hands of touch teacher, and it's an experience that they transmit. So how could it be similar to Alexander, who never received hands-on? So Alexander, again, will give us the way forward. And that's how I started to think about the problem. He says the Orthodox teaching methods hold the end in view. So holding the end in view is, for example, manipulating someone into the end in view. This has nothing to do with reasoning the means whereby the end can be obtained. So this Orthodox teaching method depends on the giving of orders on the end gaining principle. Such an order, for instance, as swing up and down again in the same orbit. This is a passage where Alexander is talking about golf. Without consideration of the means whereby, that is, and listen to this, without making certain that the pupil has the power to maintain a proper position of the spine and back, and to use the limb correctly during the performance of such physical acts. In other words, the teacher should first discover if his pupil is reasonably correctly coordinated in those muscular uses of his organism which are essential to the proper carrying out of instructions necessary to the performance of definite physical acts demanding coordination in the use of the human body and limbs. I find this way of thinking very, very clear and to the point here. So the Orthodox teaching method, Alexander is not talking of the modern Alexander technique because it didn't exist at the time. He's talking about the technique of somatic teachers or physical education teachers. But nowadays, when you listen to a modern Alexander technique teacher with different tips, tips to set the feet on the floor, tips to have the hands away from the back, a tip to, well, all these different tips are not connected instructions. They are not directed to the mechanism of the back and torso. I wanted to pinpoint for some of my students, because they don't understand that I never speak about the neck. But if you look at this sentence, you will find that Alexander is saying that without consideration of the means whereby, in his mind means without making certain that the pupil has the power to maintain a proper position of his spine and back and to use the limbs correctly during the performance of such physical acts. There is no question of the neck here. It's clear that it's the direction of the mechanism of the torso is going to create the condition for a free neck. If the thoracic spine is in any way shortened or distorted, there is no way that the neck mechanism can be free. The freeing the neck comes from the organization of the mechanism of the torso. So we have to understand that it is not possible to give lessons of Alexander technique to the wide audience, to the public, because we should first discover if the pupil is reasonably coordinated, if the person is able of the proper carrying out of instructions necessary for the performance of definite physical acts. So there are instructions to lengthen and widen the back. And the first thing is to give these instructions to the person and create the process where the person will more and more be capable of subordinating the movement to the instructions. It's not because you give instruction that the person is going to be able to perform the act, especially if the act is complex and contrary to the way the person feels, normally feels when using the torso in any act. So once again, as I said before, we have to make sure that the pupil is going to start using verbal instruction to expand the attention first. There is a mental activity that is involved in the initial Alexander technique and that cannot be bypassed. It's absolutely obvious that coordination on the psychophysical level, well, involves a very new work with the mind, with how to use words, when one feels strange, when one feels well out of sort, and so the coordination in the use of the human body and limbs, that is the coordination of the series of movements of the different parts of the body and limbs, the body being the torso and the limbs being the arms and legs, is a necessary work that you cannot bypass. So it's impossible to give a tip of the initial Alexander technique. What tip? For example, there is a tip that is given in the same video is, well, the average person should have both feet flat on the floor while working. So yes, we have to understand that we're discussing working with people that are sitting at a desk for hours. So it's very interesting, I think, to give this kind of advice. Keep your feet on the floor, flat. Well, it's an advice that is impossible to follow. It's very funny, because if you go to any sort of office and you look at the way the people sit, how many movements they do in 1 minute with the different parts, the jerkings, the contortion, the pulling down, it's like a film. And so you expect somebody to be able to have both feet flat on the floor. Well, that requires a level of coordination between what you say and what you do that is way, way beyond. After 5 minutes, after 1 minute of having the feet flat on the floor, the person will erupt. It feels like impossible, like physically. And mentally, it's like madness. The person has to concentrate. Some of my pupils, they go. I had one the other day. She went for a 1 week retreat of peaceful calm. And a comment was quite interesting, because she said, Well, this time, sitting, it was horrendous, but less than before. Yes, when you start to sit quiet, you find how agitated you are, and and you see that if you are asked to sit quietly, you find that you're not used to sitting quietly. This is absolutely different from your habitual activity. So giving somebody, I find it funny to give somebody the advice, the very best modern Alexander tip is to sit with your feet flat on the floor. I would have loved to have seen the feet of the person that gave the instruction to see if they were flat on the floor for, I don't know, the video is 10 minutes or something like that. If it's that requires a high level of psychophysical coordination. You must be capable to give orders, and the placement of the feet will depend on the overall lengthening and widening of the torso. And from what I saw on the picture, it's absolutely obvious that the person was unduly lifting the front part of the chest, as Alexander explains it, which means that there is a shortening of the back. And in that case, well, sitting without moving for a minute or two will become very difficult. So keeping the feet in place is possible, but you'll have to concentrate on it. And it's absolutely not the idea. We want to be capable of letting the back support the arms and limbs. And it's only when the back can support the arms and limbs that you can perform the activities that was announced as one of the best tips to work on at a desk. So the coordination between the body and limbs is a subject of exploration, but it's only on a one-to-one basis that I consider that this is possible, because that exploration requires first a set of mental tools that the person has not yet developed. It must be clear that we are not asking people to use their mind in the way that is habitual and to use their body with the use that they have habitually, and just giving a few instructions will do the trick. This is not the Alexander technique. This is insane. It's absolutely clear that the work must start with the well, the direction of attention, the direction of memory, the capacity to transform instructions into actions. And the possibility to transform means that you need a process, because at first it's not going to be very successful. So it's necessary for the subject to be able to evaluate what the person is doing on a video and to take action according to what she sees. So it's quite a process. Sometimes I'm asked, how many lessons do people need? My answer is indirect. I say it will depend on the person's decision. I never ask a person to take more than one lesson at a time. I never take 5 lessons or 10 lessons in advance, ever. I prefer for the person to make the decision to have another lesson on her own, because every lesson is being confronted with adverse conditions of thinking, and thinking in these adverse conditions, developing this capacity to think against adverse conditions. And so adverse conditions are produced by the movement that we are requesting, that are new. So if you request a person to do 3 or 4 movements, new movement at the same time, the person is also facing with an adverse condition, which is that the person has no habit of thinking of 4 things at once with a definite performance to be filmed straight away. I mean, you don't have time to organize and to create like a sort of automaticity. Most of the students at first, they believe in reflexes, or a version that is automaticity. That is, if I repeat something time and time again, it's going to be performed like by itself. It's exactly what we are fighting against in the lessons of initial Alexander technique. I always give new orders. I don't want the person to become a prodigy at automaticity. It's absolutely not interesting to solve new problems. To solve new problems, you need to, in fact, organize different things together all the time. If you start organizing some object every single time in the same way, well, you get stupid. You never get more intelligent at doing it. It's obvious. So the adversity is fundamental to the initial Alexander technique. And once the pupil discover this, the person has to make the decision to come back for another lesson. Of course, these lessons are going to have the person progress and develop new capacity of coordination, of psychophysical coordination. Yes, but there is a cost of learning. The person must train herself to do things and to think things that are out of her range of habitual action, that are under the guidance of automaticity. No, it's we are talking conscious guidance. That's
You
it.
mentioned a child's coordination earlier.
Yeah.
So it's coordination is something that the child, that all of us have to construct during our life. It's not something that you're just born with fixed, that then you go around applying your coordination. And because the young child, you give the example of they don't know how to coordinate themselves in order to jump over an imaginary line yet, because they haven't developed verbal reasoning. Then we develop verbal reasoning when we get older, but we somehow don't learn more about how to apply it to our movements.
Yes.
So it's like the education is stopped. It's not so much something's gone wrong, that it was perfect and then we've lost it and need to get back to it. It's that we need to continue the development of constructing the coordination of your thinking, your decisions, along with your movements.
Yes.
It's an unfinished process is a better way to think about it.
Yes, I agree totally with that. And I think that Alexander is not very far behind. He said that in the evolution of man, of course, at one moment, the mental capacities have developed tremendously. But he says they have not developed with the coordination of the mental and the physical. They have developed on their own. We have been capable of developing languages, of developing ways of thinking, imagining, creating new things, but it was always outside of the coordination of the movements. So the coordination of the movement has stayed under the guidance of somatic cognition. That's Alexander's point. And he says there is a need of coordination between the verbal reasoning mind and the activity, the physical activity of the movements of the different parts. So I think that's where he wanted to work. And that's certainly where we do work with the initial Alexander technique. So it's not about tips. It's not about, in fact, producing instructions that are disconnected. It's about starting to realize that, wow, yes, there is a field where we can explore our intelligence. It's not
So
a field. Yeah. Sorry.
Giving general tips for coordination in this work, it's almost these isolated tips for general people. It's almost end gaining by definition.
I think it is endgaining, but I think it's, of course, it is endgaining by definition, but I do think that the person is not producing this video for the sake of the people. These videos are produced in order to attract customers. It's a marketing. Alexander had the same problem. Alexander sometimes is producing reasoning in order to explain, and sometimes is just trying to gain more customers to make more money. I respect people doing these kind of efforts to get more customers, but there is an ethical problem. Is that you make people believe things that are untrue, so your position is insecure. I think it's much better to tell from the start that this is not going to be easy. This is going to ask you to require a lot of work from you, that you must forget any idea of comfortable in the process. I much prefer to select people not to come and have lesson with me or with you or with us than to come for false reasons.
Those pupils tend not to be the best at learning the work anyway. If you come with a mindset of wanting quick results from quick tips, it's more difficult to learn.
The whole marketing business is strange, in fact, in my view. I find it. Let them come for any reason, and I will. When I have my hands on them, they will see. Well, it's a strange position to have regarding, respect. And we are talking about Black Lives Matters, but people matter to me. And I prefer to tell them, the technique is not simple, because the coordination of the movements of the different parts of the torso has nothing simple in it. I cannot find anything simple. If you want to understand the mechanism of the torso, you need to understand that, placing the foot on the floor will have some impact. And how many ways to place the foot on the floor is there? There are so many. So tips. It's funny to ask somebody to place the feet flat on the floor for any length of time. I really engage people to make the experiment.
You can also delude yourself that you're keeping them on the floor, but really you're tapping them, you're wiggling your toes.
Yes.
You're doing something. So there's not just the guidance of the movements to end up with your feet on the floor. There's also the control of the movements after.
Yes,
to know whether it actually
and the connection
work,
between the feet, the front of the feet, the base of the feet, then also the ankle, the knee, the iliac, the hip, and the base of the torso. Alexander sees two things. He says there is the placing of the torso, the posing of the torso, sorry, and the poise of the chest. And so you must realize that these words have meaning, that how the lower part of the torso is placed relatively to the middle part of the torso. I consider this is the pose of the torso. And we know that the base of the torso is on two spots, is on the sitting bones. So it's a rotating mechanism. So we have a rotating mechanism. On top of it, we have another part that is the lower rib cage. How the two are organized together. This is the pose of the torso. But then he's talking of the poise of the chest. And you realize very quickly that for him, the chest is a rotating mechanism. He's always talking about unduly lifting the front part of the chest. Well, if you unduly lift the front part of the chest, you're rotating an object. And so when you start having a rotating object above another rotating object, you must understand that the guidance of this mechanism will not respond to tips.
It's a complex mechanism
that
requires complex thinking and decisions, and then
and control
way of implementing them.
And implementing them, very, very important to control. I think control is way undervaluated in the modern Alexander technique. We need to give the pupil control. The pupil must be capable of observing her experiments of conscious guidance and saying, when she performs on her own, in her own environment, our own desk, seeing whether she is organizing the different movements, rotating movements of these parts in the proper direction, or if she's in fact going in the wrong way. And it's not for the teacher to be there with his hands to make that statement. That statement has to be made by the person herself, so that she can have an input on her own work. That's authority. The authority is with the pupil, not with the teacher. Any such of people that have the authority to give best tips have misjudged understanding of what teaching means. Teaching doesn't mean giving tips. Teaching means helping people to start experimenting, helping people develop the tool so that they can experiment with good evolution, with good progress, so that they see where they are. So
continue the process of self-construction,
of
which they began
yeah,
as a child.
Exactly.
Excellent. Okay, let's finish up there today, Jeando. For everyone listening, there's a link to Jeando's website underneath, so you can go there and book a lesson with him. And we will see you in the next video. Thank you, Jeando.
Thank you.